RN Julie McFadden, otherwise known as Hospice Nurse Julie on TikTok, is with us today to talk about why her hospice videos on TikTok have gone viral and what she finds meaningful about working in end-of-life care. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer, here with Jerry Fenter.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care. The Heart of Hospice is partnering with end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes, author of The Little Blue Book, to present a talk at the California Hospice and Palliative Care Association annual conference coming up June the 6th through the 10th in Orange, California. The conference theme is Back to the Basics at the Bedside and will feature talks on hospice eligibility, documentation, and a 2-day LNEC pre-conference. Visit calhospice.org to register. Be sure to tell them you heard about it on the Heart of Hospice podcast, and we'll see you there.
The nurses took over this interview.
Oh, man.
You are welcome.
I didn't have to say very much. I'll have to say that.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, but Hospice Nurse Julie, she has created a phenomenon.
Amazing. 800,000 followers on TikTok.
Just on TikTok.
For videos about end-of-life care.
Right, mostly about hospice.
Yes, death, dying, grief.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It really is. And she wasn't really expecting it either. We don't want to tell her story. Well, you'll hear more about that in the interview. But TikTok doesn't seem like the right medium to talk about hospice, right? And I think that's why it's so unusual. Right. Because TikTok is really for, the younger set.
And for dance videos and different things like that. So, she's going to tell you her story and about the work that she does and how the videos came about and what the work that she's doing. So here's our conversation with hospice nurse Julie McFadden.
Hospice Nurse Julie, we are so glad to have you on the Heart of Hospice podcast. Welcome.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you here. So you have become a TikTok phenomenon. How did this happen?
You're telling me. I don't know. No, I can thank my nieces, let me tell you, because I went home, after we were all vaccinated, I went home. And they were on TikTok. And of course, as the funny aunt that I am, I'm kind of making fun of them and thinking it's silly. And they were doing dances. And I thought it was, it's just, I'm too old for this, is what I thought. But I just went on TikTok to kind of watch them do their thing and dance and like their videos. And I even did a couple TikToks with them while I was home. But, once you get on TikTok, it's hard not to like it. Because I found that there were people on there doing informational videos. Of course, it's like, and it was just interesting. So I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to make videos about death and dying and the things I know about hospice and the misconceptions. And I had so many videos in like a millisecond. I had a million videos I could think of to do. And I just did them and started posting. And I would say 4 days later, one of them took off, and it kind of was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to do this. And now I'm here.
Yeah. So
what was the topic for that fourth video that went crazy?
Oh, I love me some Barbara Carnes. So Barbara Carnes, we all love Barbara Carnes. I made a video with her little blue book, the Gone From My Sight book behind me. Right. And I was just talking about this amazing book and what it says in this book. And that was the first one that took off.
Barbara Carnes. Mm-hmm. Gotta love Barbara Carnes. She's awesome. So for our listeners that don't know Barbara Carnes, and I don't know how our listeners could not know them because we talk about her constantly. We're a little obsessed. She is a hospice end-of-life educator. She's amazing. She has worked in hospice since the beginning.
Yeah, the early 80s.
Since the early 80s. Amazing lady, amazing work. And Gone From My Sight, the little blue book, is a very common resource that hospice agencies give to their patients.
I love it. It's my favorite. And I really fangirled out. Like Barbara Carnes was, I mean, you guys know this too, I'm sure. Like to me, she was like this far out person who I never thought I'd ever actually see or meet.
Right.
And we've met on social media. We've done a couple lives together. It truly has been like, our first live together, I teared up. I was like tearing up because I couldn't believe I was doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, we totally understand, because the first time that we actually had Barbara on the podcast, it was like that for us. We were just kind of awestruck.
Yeah.
You know?
We're not worthy.
I know.
She's an amazing lady.
No.
So the topics you talk about in your TikTok videos, death and dying for real on TikTok. Tell us some of the topics that you cover, because it really doesn't seem to go with TikTok, right? What topics do you talk about?
So I knew when I first started, there were a few topics I wanted to bring up. And those were, because I think they're fascinating and I think most people don't know. So the one topic I knew I wanted to talk about was how end-of-life visioning, how a lot of people on hospice have and they're near their end of their life, usually around a month or so before they die, they could have end-of-life visioning where they see dead relatives, loved ones, pets, or spirits, angels, whatever, everyone's different. And it doesn't always happen, obviously. But the fact that it happens so much that we actually educate about it
right.
Is fascinating to me. And most people don't know that. So that was one of them. I love talking about I would say like phenomena that happen, like the rally or the surge of energy before someone dies. Again, doesn't happen to everybody, but it does happen and we don't really know why. So those kind of topics I loved talking about. But then as time progressed, I also wanted to talk to people about what it actually looks like to die, what I would call a natural death, meaning we're not going to do any interventions. You know, you're dying from a disease, but we're not doing any interventions to quote unquote, keep you alive. Like, what does that look like? And because it was surprising to me coming from the ICU as an ICU nurse, you know, the more and more years I was in hospice, the more and more I saw that the same things were happening over and over and over again. And the body really can take care of itself if we don't mess with it. We don't force things. And it was that's fascinating to me and comforting to me. And I wanted other people to know. So most of my videos are just all about the natural things the body does to take care of itself at end of life, like sleeping a lot, not eating a lot. I feel like it's preparing itself, right? Like less is more at the end, and different things like changes in breathing and terminal secretions. All of those things can seem really scary, but they're actually really normal. And it's a biological process that's happening in the body, and we can just let it, and it's okay. So a lot of my videos stem around just pure education about things people might see. And then they just go from there, because then that stems questions from the followers, and then I answer those questions, and it just kind of carries on.
TikTok seems like sort of an unusual place to be talking about this, right? You're not doing a dance video. You're not doing any of those 1-minute political rants sitting in your car. You know, it seems like an unusual place. And the typical user, the age for the typical user of TikTok is 16 to 24, right? Which those aren't the people we typically think about that are having these conversations about advanced care planning or thinking about pre-need payment for funerals. You know, you think about somebody my age, quite a bit older, 50s and the 60s, that kind of thing. Why do you think that the people who watch TikTok videos are so drawn to what you're talking about? Why are those topics so attractive?
You know, I didn't know when I first started if people were going to really listen, because from what I was finding in my day-to-day life, people didn't want to hear what I had to say about death and dying. Like my parents, for instance, right? I would try to talk to them about the things I talk about on TikTok, like end-of-life planning. What would they want if something happened? And they hush me away. You know, don't talk about that kind of stuff. I don't want to talk about that, right? So I didn't know how I was going to be perceived, especially on TikTok, right? Because I don't know anything about TikTok either. I'm not the age that people are. I'm 39, so it's not like I'm prime age for TikTok. But what I will say is I started it just to see, because I thought it was information that people needed to know. And I've been validated that I think people are interested, and it's because we all are going to experience death. as you know. I feel like we all kind of logically know that in our minds. And if we're not experiencing it right now, we know someone in our life who is. So either our parents or our grandparents, I think it's more relatable than we think it is. And people are kind of hungry for like education about things that seem mysterious. And death can be mysterious, but also not totally. So I think taking some of the mystery out of it might make it seem less scary. But with all of that said, I don't really know why. I'm kind of surprised too. I'm happy about it. I'm glad people are listening. I want it to change the way we think about death and dying. And I know there's a whole a whole community of us, you guys included, who all want to change the way we look at death and dying and normalize the talk about death and dying. So I don't totally know why, but I'm glad it's happening because I think it needs to.
Absolutely. And I'm grateful for what you're doing because we want to change people's perceptions of death and dying. We want to change people's perceptions about hospice because there's so many people who still don't understand what hospice is really all about and what we do and the way that we do it. And so your little series or segments that you did about the myths of hospice was perfect. That's what they need to hear. That's what people need to hear. So how many followers do you have on TikTok now?
Right now, I have like over 800,000.
That's incredible.
Wow. I know. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so you've actually been featured on some major national publications as well as, have you been on any of the television news shows?
I haven't been on any. I mean, I've been on like live streaming TV shows. One was in Australia, actually. It was a morning show.
In Australia.
I know. What?
But that is so awesome.
I know. I had to ask the guy interviewing me to repeat things because I couldn't understand him. I'm like, I know you're speaking English, but your accent is so different than mine. I can't understand you. So that was pretty cool. And then one in Mexico as well. So that was pretty cool. But in general, it's mostly online news outlets.
Great. Yeah. Great. So, but you've been featured on some publications too. Did you say USA Today?
Yeah, USA Today, a couple times in Newsweek. The first time that I was in Newsweek, other people took that article from Newsweek and then just sort of ran with it. So then a lot of different publications and, People and USA Today and New York Post, but it was all from the same article that was featured in Newsweek.
Right.
So that was crazy.
It seems like that the reason this is taken off so much is because of the seeming contrast between talking about hospice and death and dying on TikTok videos. I mean, the contrast there seems to be the reason people are really finding an interest in this. Yeah. But it's good. It really is good.
It's not the ordinary content you typically find on TikTok. It's unusual.
Right. And you guys are so right. I honestly have not thought about that. But you're right. It's not, I think too, so just so for TikTok, you get a For You page, meaning TikTok gives you feeds of what they think you would like. So because I put out so much stuff about death and dying and hospice and palliative care, I think TikTok feeds me a bunch of stuff like that. So I see other people doing it. So I forget that most of TikTok isn't actually like that. But what I'm seeing, it looks like it is. Do you know what I mean? Like all I see is like other nurses kind of doing the same thing I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So it's funny. But yeah, you're right. TikTok in general is not doing that, of course.
Interesting.
Right. Well, with all these followers, I kind of assume that maybe you get questions from your followers about hospice.
Yes, I do. So I get, it's hard to actually keep up. But I do try to answer like the most common ones. I get all types of questions about a lot of people thinking their loved one was suffering. They'll explain, my dad looked like this, and this. Mm-hmm. What was going on? Was he okay? And a lot of times I feel like confidently answer that they were okay. Like usually what they're describing is just the actively dying process. So I try to re-educate about how those are normal things you're going to be seeing at the end of life. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're suffering. I I get a lot of questions too about like specific diseases, like what will this specific disease look like at the end of life? A lot of questions about the fear of death, which I was really surprised about. I was not anticipating people with death anxiety, which I didn't really even know was a thing. That's like one of my most asked questions about how not to fear death and how can I be less afraid to die. Which of course I try to say, like, I have no, because I'm not, I'm not a counselor. I don't know, I'm a hospice worker who's around death all the time, and I don't fear death. So I do try to like just talk to them about educating themselves around the topic. But in general, like I have no specialty in that. Right. But they have said that just educating themselves and watching my videos has decreased the fear. So that's something that's come out of it that's been kind of surprising. The only thing I don't answer, of course, is like medical advice. I do get kind of a lot of people wanting me to answer medical advice, and I have to steer away from that, obviously.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of questions about meds, especially morphine? We gave my dad morphine. We started it one day and he died the next day. Did I kill him? Do you get a lot of questions like that? Because there is such a stigma around the use of morphine, which, so for our listeners, morphine is used for pain management in hospice, but it's also used to manage shortness of breath. We help our patients be very comfortable. We never hasten death with medications, but there is quite a lot of misinformation about morphine and how we use it, to the point where a lot of people refuse to have it in the home.
Yes, that's one of my soapboxes.
Yeah.
So misunderstood, and it causes so many issues. It's just so misunderstood. And people hear the word morphine and they're like, no, not that. That's too much.
We're not using that dope. So do you get a lot of people that comment or have questions about use of that?
Yes, not only on TikTok, but in my real life job, right? Yeah, because I'm actually, I am a hospice nurse and I do mostly admission work. So I'm the first nurse they see. I'm talking to them about the comfort pack, what's in the comfort pack, what to use for X, Y, and Z. And that's one of my staples that I never leave a hospice start of care or an admission. We call them start of care, but just in case you don't know what that is, it's an admission into hospice. One of my things I always go over is what you just talked about, is how morphine helps, what it doesn't do, what it does do, and how there's a common, just to lessen the fear around giving it to your loved one. And I do tons of videos about that. And that's actually one of my first videos I did, now that I think about it, was making sure I educated about how morphine is not hastening death and why we use it and what it actually does for the patient and their loved one.
I would say if I had to narrow it down to the top 5 myths about hospice, because there are a lot of them, there are a lot of myths and things that people don't understand about end-of-life care, that morphine use one would be in the top 5. Maybe in the top 3, because that's a big one. That really is a big one. So I love it that you're myth busting in your TikToks. I think that's awesome. There's such a culture, and maybe this is why it resonates with the TikTok audience so well. There's such a culture of Della Reese is coming to your bedside, and you're going to find out that the people who have been caring for you that you had never met before are actually angels sent from God to help you get your life all squared away, and then the white light's going to shine on them, and she's going to sing you a song while you have a deathbed reconciliation with people you haven't seen in 25 years. It's just this horribly unrealistic theatrical version of death, which I think is extremely damaging, because what we've done is create this culture of people that have no idea what a natural death looks like, where it's unencumbered by all the clinical and mechanical stuff that we can do in the hospital. You can die peacefully at home. It looks way different from what you think it does.
Yes, there's the key. Yeah, there's the key, because it looks different and doesn't necessarily, and people don't think it's peaceful. And you're like, no, this is what death looks like. This is what it looks like.
Right. And it can absolutely be peaceful. And hospice can help you do that. And sometimes morphine is a piece of that.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Exactly. But I do get, it never fails with the morphine one. Just you do get some, like I would call like haters, people who are just hell bent on being like, nope.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
Killed my loved one, and for that, I just sort of, I don't necessarily engage there, and because they're usually just hurting, and I just try to educate best I can. And, it does hit a lot of people, which is good. So a lot of people do hear it and feel relief from it. And that's amazing. Some people don't, and that's okay too.
Right. There's still always the patient's and the family's choice. I get that.
Yeah.
We're excited to share a great educational opportunity with you. The California Hospice and Palliative Care Association is holding its annual conference coming up in June of 2022. It's going to be on the beautiful campus of Chapman University in Orange, California. The conference starts with an LNEC communication curriculum on Monday and Tuesday, June 6th and 7th, followed by the annual conference and exposition Wednesday through Friday, June 8th through the 10th. The theme for this year's conference is Back to the Basics at the Bedside. You'll hear information on the basic principles of the pillars of quality hospice care taught by experts in the end-of-life industry. This is a great opportunity to get those continuing education units and to reset your focus on what's really important in patient care. Early registration is open until April 1st, so visit the CHAPCA website at calhospice.org to register and tell them you heard about it on the Heart of Hospice podcast.
So, Julie, I want to get a little personal with you for just a minute if we can. And I want to find out, how did you find yourself working in hospice? You said just a moment ago that you were working in ICU as a nurse. How did you finally get into hospice? And I like to ask this question because Helen and I have told our story about how we got into hospice, and both of us just kind of fell into it. It was not something where, early in our life, we said, oh, I really want to help people. I want to be in hospice. That wasn't like that. We needed a job and we found hospice. So it was kind of like that. How did you come into hospice?
I definitely didn't set out in my nursing career thinking I would ever be in hospice. I don't remember even thinking anything about hospice when I first graduated nursing school. I was really set on my path, which I thought I knew, which was be an ICU nurse for 2 years and then go back to school for anesthesia. And little did I know, because the second I was an ICU nurse, it took me 2 years to even get comfortable being an ICU nurse. Really, by the end of the first 6 months of my nursing career, I was dreaming of beeping and it was just nothing. I was so overwhelmed. I just didn't know what I was getting into. So my path changed very quickly. And after 2 years of ICU nursing, I already was pretty burnout. And I was kind of like, this is not what I thought this was going to be. I think I chose the wrong career. I don't think I'm meant to be a nurse. I'm not feeling this like other nurses. Some nurses, you could tell, were really into it. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I like this. Anyway, I stayed in it for another 9. I was an ICU nurse for 9 years. So I stuck with it somehow. Yeah, it was just very, I don't regret it. I learned a lot. But being in the ICU for that many years really helped me see that I didn't want to keep doing this. And I didn't think I wanted to be a nurse. But as I saw how people were really, not everyone in the ICU, but there were so many people in the ICU that I just felt we did a disservice to, because we weren't talking about the bigger picture. We weren't talking about end of life. Ever. Every once in a while, because we absolutely had to, because someone was basically dead in a bed for months on end. We were keeping them alive through X, Y, and Z ways, where eventually we had to talk about it. It was just, to me, kind of horrendous. It was I can't, there has to be a better way to die if you're going to die. And we have to get better at talking about it. And we need to talk about it sooner. And why are the healthcare workers talking about it amongst themselves, but then not talking about it with the families? Why are we doing this? And I'm not trying to talk a bunch of crap on other healthcare workers and, just stuff I was noticing. Right. And I was a newer nurse, so I wasn't knowing what was right or wrong or what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. But as the years went on and I wasn't a new nurse anymore, I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. something needs to be happening here. And I had more of a voice in the ICU towards the end. And I noticed that my voice really mattered and people listened, not because of me, but what I noticed was it just took one person. It took one person to have the courage to say, hey, this doesn't seem right. I think this person's probably going to die. We should really let the family understand this. We should have a family meeting. And that's all it took. And then everyone was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, we should do that. So I started seeing how I could have change there, right? And how it just took one person to be a little bit brave and say the thing that no one wanted to say, to make things kind of happen, which got me into wanting to learn all about how to talk about death and dying, which then turned into like, now I'm interested in hospice. So eventually I just like bit the bullet and quit my ICU nursing job and applied for a hospice job that said must have experience with hospice nursing. And I didn't. And I basically went to the first interview just like begging and pleading, being like, I've been a miserable ICU nurse. I just want this experience. I want to learn how to be a hospice nurse. Like, please give me a chance. And they did. And it was amazing. And I learned so much. I mean, talk about learning curve. People think like a nurse is a nurse. No way. You learn so many different things in the ICU, so many different things in oncology, so many different things in hospice, so many different things in palliative care. You know, so it was amazing that first few months, the first like 6 months to a year of being a hospice nurse. Man, it opened my eyes.
Yeah.
To things I just didn't know.
Huge learning curve, right?
Huge learning curve. Yeah.
So this is what I will tell you. The first time you opened your mouth and said, we know this patient's going to die, we should talk to this family, that's when you started your hospice nursing career. Yeah. Oh, that's when you started that. I will tell you that. When you advocate for someone for end-of-life needs, that is hospice work. It absolutely is. And I'm so glad that you were. But I have to ask you, as a nurse, right, why do you think that those conversations weren't happening? Was it the fact that it's a culture of aggressive, emergent, urgent care in an ICU, which is great. That's what it's for. Were you guys not trained to have those conversations? Was it uncomfortable? Did it aggravate family dynamics and y'all didn't want to take time with it? Because let's face it, you stir up all that stuff and the healthcare team ends up having to deal with everybody. Why do you think those conversations weren't taking place?
I'm curious to see if they are now, right? Because it's been, 5 or 6 years since I've been in the ICU, right? But at the time, it definitely was, at least from my experience at the hospital that I was at, nurses were definitely not trained. We weren't given any kind of, this wasn't even part of, it didn't even like cross my mind for a couple of years because I was so go, hurry, task oriented. You had to hurry up and care, which is impossible.
Exactly.
And it was a teaching hospital. So I wonder too, it was a teaching hospital. So there was these big rounds be in front of every room with an attending, fellows, residents, med students, and then nurses. And it still was not brought up. And I think it's because we were taught, especially in an ICU, and then it was a surgical ICU, that you need to get this person better, right? And if the course is not going as it should, what happened? How do we get back on course to get them out of the ICU, to get them home?
Right. Your goal is just different.
Yeah, the goal is just different. And really, I will say, like once I was there for many years, I started seeing I need to speak up. I need to be the person, or someone needs to be someone. You just need to say, what about the bigger picture here?
Yeah.
What is this when they do get home? What does that look like? Right. Because there'll be people who had, maybe I'm getting too detailed, but like for a great example is someone with pancreatic cancer who got the Whipple procedure, right? What is their life going to look like after the surgery is over? Like, what's their life expectancy? Yes. Where, that's never discussed. And it just seemed like it was very zeroed in on just get them out of the ICU, and it's not because they didn't care. It's just because they were super hyper focused too. There was one attending, I will say, her name was Rebecca, and I will never forget her because whenever she rounded, she always had end of life conversations, always talked about the bigger picture. And I started really just following her around and wanting to emulate her and like learn how to talk like her. And educate like her. And so there are definitely people out there that see the need for that. And I think it's no one's fault. It's just like a cultural shift that like just doesn't happen. It's just not built in for some reason.
The culture of healthcare in this country. And because we are so siloed as practitioners, I mean, I think for nurses, right? I can only speak for nurses. It may be similar for chaplains working in the hospital versus working in hospice, things like that. But we are so siloed in the work that we do, right? You put the blinders on. This is your goal. This is where, I mean, we're all about quality of life and symptom management in hospice. You know, if you're a pediatric nurse, it's different. If you're a surgical nurse, it's all different. And I was never cross-trained in the hospital. I was a floater in the hospital, which means you went, you know, from unit to unit as was needed. But that was really just to put a warm body with clinical skills and a license in a place that needed filling. They weren't training me on those things because with nursing school, we don't provide end-of-life training. It doesn't happen that way. I think we have a tendency to only see our section of things. Which is good. We want you to be really good. If you're my ICU nurse, Julie, I don't want you to start thinking about whether I'm going to die necessarily. You know, my goal is for you to manage whatever crisis I'm in so that I can get put back out onto the regular floor and then transition out to my home, you know, hopefully completely restored and healing, et cetera. So I think we get super hyper-focused, like you're saying, very siloed in the different dimensions of nursing that we practice.
Yep.
Now that you're in hospice, what do you find most meaningful about this end-of-life work that you're doing?
The whole thing is so meaningful, but I think what makes it the most is connection with people. There is I just did a video about this on TikTok that was like very spontaneous because it was like, I left this house kind of like soaring like this. And it was like, people think this job is depressing. And it's not. And I can't really explain why, because nothing really happened at this visit except for like this connection. And I don't know if it's because there's the patient and the loved one who's caring for the patient are both so vulnerable or something at this moment and then I'm vulnerable and we're both vulnerable. And there's just this connection to like humanity that is like nothing else. And it just leaves me feeling very fulfilled and like I'm really helping people, and I hope they feel the same way. And that's the greatest gift, I think. And it really happens almost on a daily basis where it's like you get to meet. I'm going into people's homes, so that's like intimate, right? They're allowing me into their home. They're allowing me to talk about really personal, vulnerable things. They're taking that in. They're asking really vulnerable questions. They're really showing, telling me vulnerable things like I'm scared or what can I expect or I'm really overwhelmed. And you can just be I'm able to sit there and kind of just witness that and not necessarily make it all better, but at least be someone who's a listening ear and tell them how we can help the best we can. And it's just unbelievable sometimes, this like feeling of connection with the person you just met. Yeah. So that's the greatest gift. Among many things.
That's good. I love the way that you answered that. You really do meet people in such a vulnerable time for them, and yet you make this connection that is just beautiful. It's wonderful.
You know, the way we go into people's homes, you were talking about, there's some intimacy there. I would say that it goes so much further than the fact that they've let us into their homes. They've let us into the most fragile part of their lives, the most fragile emotions, or the times that they're least able to cope with what's happening, losing a loved one or looking at the end of their own lives. I think there's such a place of trust that they honor us with. And of course, they would rather not be at that point, right? Nobody really wants to be in that position, in that situation. But then they open up and say, okay, we're going to let you in. You're going to get to see my physical body, battered, sick, whatever, aging, frail, however you see it. I'm going to let you in on all my family dysfunction in my living space. And you're going to know all my physical problems, and then I'm going to dump my emotional stuff. You're going to witness all these things, and I just met you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like speed dating. I'm not making a joke at the expense of these people, but it really is. It's like that 60-second wedding thing. Blind date wedding kind of stuff, You step out. I think you said it earlier about being brave. We step in with courage to say things that people don't want to hear. We know they don't want to hear it. We don't want to have to tell them. But there's an incredible place of honor when you get to work as a hospice person.
I think too, a thing I notice is the more you are one person that they meet that can be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Like, we're not trying to be like, oh no, don't say that. Oh no. We let them say all of the things.
Right.
And we just sit there. Oh no, I'm never like, oh no, don't cry. Right? Like,
you're making me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Like, at least you live this long. I mean, not that I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, but people get really uncomfortable when people are uncomfortable. So to be a person to show up in their space. And I mean, because honestly, a lot of times I'm not doing much except for not saying a word and letting them. I mean, don't get me wrong. I say a bunch of words, but like a lot of times when they're showing emotions or they're saying they're scared, or I'm not trying to say anything about don't. I just let them be.
Right.
And I feel like that really helps people sometimes to just be a person who's really comfortable with them saying really uncomfortable things or showing really uncomfortable emotions.
And you don't leave.
Yeah, you don't leave. I'm
going to sit here with you.
Yeah.
Such an important, valuable work that we all get to do in hospice. It's incredible. I love being able to do this work in hospice. So I'm curious about one thing, Julie. Have you had people in real life say, "Oh, I know you. I saw you on TikTok"?
No, thank God. And the masks are helping, I think. I don't know if I have enough followers for that to ever happen, but I do know that I still wear masks into people's homes. And I think that I'm glad of that, because I don't know why I'd feel like a little embarrassed. I would feel embarrassed if my actual patients were like, "Are you hospice nurse Julie?" Oh my God, I would die. I would die. So
you're going to have to let us know. You're going to have to let us know if that happens. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually had an occasion when I was interviewing somebody for a job, and the HR person had called him and said, "Yeah, the person you're going to interview with is Jerry Fenter." And he stopped and he said, "The Jerry Fenter?"
Oh my gosh.
And I laughed. I'm like, "What are you talking? Oh, I've heard you on the Heart of Hospice podcast."
Isn't he that guy that podcasts with with Helen Bauer, the hospice nurse? No.
It was a little embarrassing. It really was. So yeah, if that ever happens to you, we want to know.
Gosh, I'll keep you guys posted. I do feel like at work, people will be like, "Julie, are you on TikTok?" People who I work with who already know me will be like, because I don't tell anyone that I'm on TikTok, they'll be like, are you, that's you, right? I'm like,
yes.
Right. That's cool.
That is awesome. So what projects do you have coming up? What events do you have going on? I know you got some plans in the works somewhere.
I always have different lives coming up. I do a lot of TikTok lives. The main thing, I don't know. I mean, this is just in the works. So I do have a literary agent, and they are making a proposal up to send out to different publishing companies. So whether that happens or not, we don't know. But
nice.
It is in the works. That's the main thing. But other than that, I'm just I'm kind of taking this whole thing day by day and just having fun with it and just making videos and doing TikTok and being on Instagram and kind of seeing what comes of it, So yeah, that's really it.
So it's still fun, right?
Yeah, it's still fun. Yeah, definitely.
Good.
Awesome.
I don't take it too serious or myself too serious.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So they can find you on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as Hospice Nurse Julie. And we'll have links to your social media in the show notes so our listeners can go straight in and connect with you on your different platforms.
That's great. I love it. Thank you so much, guys.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being with us today. It's great to meet you, to get to have this conversation with you, and just know that you're one of our people. You know, you advocate for hospice just like we do, and that's wonderful. So thank you so much for what you're doing and for bringing all this out into the world and educating people about what end of life is really all about. So we're grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I feel the same way about you. Love my people.
Okay, so we've heard all about how this happened. We've heard about how she got into hospice, but it still doesn't seem to make sense to me.
It doesn't. So I looked this up. So according to TikTok, the app is available in over 150 countries. It has 1 billion with a B users. 60% of those users are between the ages of 16 and 24. Not your typical audience that you would think is considering advanced care planning or end-of-life wishes or even caring for somebody who might be on hospice.
Right. That's true. So 80% are between 16 and 34. Not your typical hospice demographic.
Mm-mm. People like you and me, 50s and 60s, thinking about either their own end-of-life wishes or they're considering things like that for their parents,
right.
But not the younger demographic. And she said she was surprised too.
Yeah, she was. And it really just took off from there. And now she's been interviewed by USA Today and Newsweek. And It's just incredible how much attention she has achieved with just doing these TikTok videos.
So if you want to connect with Hospice Nurse Julie, you can find her by that particular handle, Hospice Nurse Julie, on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. Don't miss out on connecting with her. Share it. Watch the videos. They're awesome. She's myth-busting and really providing great support and great education.
Yes, and we're so grateful that she is providing this kind of education. This is what we need more of. I mean, that's what we're all about, is educating people about hospice and about end-of-life care. And it's great to have somebody like Julie who's doing the same thing on a little different medium, but still doing it. And we're so grateful to her for doing all of this.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer here with Jerry Fenter. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and please take a minute to leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
You can always connect with us. Just send us an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. And you can also find us on the social media platforms. And remember, no matter who you are, or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.